Chari, and today we're going to be making this micro shaker card. And I'm calling it a micro shaker card because we're going to use very small pieces to make our shaker. I've gone ahead and done some work. I've cut out a stitch circle from some mermaid cardstock and a scallop circle from some guava cardstock. And I'm just going to set these pieces aside. And I also wanted to show you how I sometimes use my dies to kind of figure out my layout. So I've just got the dies laid on there on how I'm going to arrange my pieces on the card so I know that they fit before I get started. So we're going to be using these puffy clouds, and we're also going to be using the puffy cloud frame dies that match the same shape. So here I've got some of the Stick It adhesive, which is a very thin adhesive. And I'm going to be using some craft foam here. I've got a piece of yellow. I'm going to be using that for the kite. And I only need a piece of adhesive big enough to cut that kite out of. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces, and then I'm going to do the same for the white. I'm going to cut 2 pieces for that, because with the foam, I want it to have the adhesive on both sides. And you'll see why here as I get started. So I'm going to go ahead and put adhesive on one side, and then put adhesive on the other side. And I don't need a whole lot, like I said. I'm only going to be cutting the kite out of the yellow here. So here I'm doing the same thing with the white. I'm going to need 2 clouds out of the white, so I need a little bit bigger piece. So I'm just going to take that thin adhesive and put 1 sheet on one side and 1 sheet on the other side of my foam. And you could use any color you wanted. You're just going to see the outside of it. So I'm going to be cutting the frames out of the foam to make kind of the sides of these little shaker boxes here. Now these are very intricate dies, or not super intricate, but they're very thin and fine, and that's why I decided to go ahead and put the thin adhesive on the foam ahead of time. I did try this earlier using some matte multi-medium with a very fine precision tip applicator, and you can do it. It's just a little easier with the Stick It adhesive, so whichever you have on hand. So I've used the regular puffy clouds to cut out just some white cardstock, and you can see there are the frames made out of the foam with adhesive on both sides. I've done the same here with the stitched kite. I've cut a solid piece out of white cardstock and then the frame out of the yellow foam that has adhesive on both sides. Now I want to cut the frames again just out of some regular cardstock, and I'm only going to put the Stick It adhesive on one side. And that's because this is going to be the finishing piece on top, and I only need adhesive on the side that's going to stick to my clear acetate below. So I'm going to go ahead and put some adhesive on one side of these little scraps of cardstock here. Again, the yellow will be for the kite to go with the yellow foam, and the white will be for the clouds. Now you want to make sure that the right side, the side that's going to be up, you cut from the side of the cardstock that does not have the adhesive. So you want to flip it over, and you want to cut the frame on the side without the adhesive, because you want the adhesive to be on the back of the die cut. Same with the clouds, make sure you cut it from the side without the adhesive so that the adhesive is on the back. Ask me how I know. I messed it up a couple times already. So I'm just going to leave those little frames in the die for now. And I'm being very careful to pull out the centers because I don't want to pull that backing off the adhesive just yet. So I'm also going to leave the pieces of the kite intact as well. So with my solid pieces here, I also cut some acetate ahead of time. It's kind of hard to see because it's clear, but I just used some acetate pieces and cut the solid clouds and the solid kite as well. So now we can start to assemble the little cloud here. And I learned some things when I did this first one, and you'll see, and then I kind of changed my method when I did the kite. So I'm going to pull off that adhesive backing on the back side of the cloud, and then line it up with that solid piece of cardstock and just make sure it's stuck down very well. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same with the kite. I've already pulled out the adhesive backing, and then I pulled out those center pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and put it down on that white solid back piece. Now you could double up the foam and cut 2 pieces and stack them if you need more depth depending on what you're putting inside your shaker. But I'm just using a little micro bead kind of glitter you'll see later, and so I really don't need that much depth. I'm going to go in with my powder tool just to kind of take away any sticky part that might be there from the adhesive that I've already stuck down. So here's the little micro bead glitter, and I've picked out some colors. Those are going to be for my kite, and I'm going to use the silver inside the clouds. So what I'm doing on this one is I'm going to go ahead and shake some of those micro beads in there. I have not yet pulled off that backer piece from the adhesive that's on top of the foam. And I'll show you here in a minute why I kind of changed my method. So I'm going to go ahead and put those little micro beads in there, and then I started pulling off the adhesive and I was afraid I was going to dump these little beads everywhere. Also, the adhesive came off in little pieces, and as it kind of pulled, those little beads would jump around, and some of them would jump up and get stuck on the foam. So it took me a little while to kind of take my tool here and get those beads off the foam, off my adhesive, so that I can get the acetate to stick down and back into the cloud. So it worked okay, it was just a little time consuming. So now I've got the clear piece here. It's hard to see. I've got it in my tweezers so I can kind of get my fingers out of the way and line it up good. And I'm just going to stick that down. And there are still some beads that got trapped between the foam and the acetate. It's still stuck down okay, but I'll show you a method when I do the kite that seemed to help a little bit. Now I can take that frame that I left in the die. I pull off the adhesive backer. I'm going to pop out that little cardstock frame, and then this will go on top of the acetate and hide the foam behind it. It just is a nice finishing touch. So with the kite, I did a little bit different method. So I'm going to take that cardstock piece that's going to go on top, I'm going to pull off the adhesive backer, and I'm going to go ahead and stick that piece to my acetate. That's the first thing I did different. I'm going to go ahead and line that up and put it on there. So now that top piece is already done and lined up. It kind of helps the acetate have a little more stiffness to it as well. So now for the body of the kite and filling these little holes, I went in with my powder tool again, even though I'd already done this, but just to make sure any sticky from the bottom part of the adhesive is no longer tacky. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the backer piece. So that's the first thing I did different. Pull it off now so that I don't have all those beads in there that are jumping around when this thing kind of moves from pulling this paper off. And then for the first one here with these green beads, I did the same method. I shook them in there from the little shaker. And they kind of did the same thing, not quite as bad, but I did have pieces that jumped up and got stuck on the foam. And I had to kind of push those back down with the poker tool here. So then when I did the next color, I decided I was going to try something a little different before I shook it in there. So what I did was, I decided I needed to pour it. So what I did was get a little piece of scrap paper and just fold it in half, kind of making a little funnel. And I put the beads in there against my finger, you can see there, so they didn't go all over the place. And then I could pour them into the little space there. Rather than shaking them and making them jump around as they hit the paper, pouring them was much smoother. And I felt like I could get more in there as well. So that seemed to work a lot better. So I did a green, a blue, a pink color. I'm going to do a purple here, and you'll see I'm going to go back and add a little bit more green, which was the one that I shook in there, because I got them a lot fuller doing this little method with pouring it in with a piece of cardstock. So now that I've got all my little spaces filled with the colors I want, I can take that piece of acetate with the cardstock stuck to it and just lay that over top. So now I got all these little shaker things in there. And I like these. They're kind of cool because they're so small it just looks like color. You know, you don't necessarily see all the pieces till you look really close. So I've cut some kite strings in the kite tail out of some black cardstock using the dies. that come with the kite set. And now it's time to assemble my card here. So I'm going to take the mermaid cardstock circle that I cut earlier, and I'm just going to layer that on top of the guava cardstock scallop circle that I cut. And I'm just going to put a block on it so it stays flat while it just dries a little bit there. And then I'm going to make a card base for this to go on top of. So the way I do this is I just score it like a regular A4 size card. And then I'm going to take my scallop circle that matches the one that the guava cardstock circle's cut out of, and I'm going to line it up to where 2 of the scallops go past the top at the fold. That way it'll stay folded, it won't cut through the fold. And that little part that's flat up there is going to get covered up by the pink cardstock circle anyways. And I always like to make sure I've got 2 at the top, that way the card can stand up. It's supported by 2 scallops at the bottom rather than being centered on one. It's centered on between 2, like the little inset, which makes them stand up if you're going to take a picture or just have them on display. So I'm just going to line up that circle, and I like to do this before I put any pieces on my card. That way I don't have to worry and make sure that I got it lined up with where the top is. Then I can take my card and lay it on my grid mat in the right place to where I know where the top and the bottom is. So I just laid out my pieces here where I want them once I got my arrangement right. I'm just going to glue them down. I'm using a precision tip multi-matte medium, mostly for the strings, but also because I started running out of my Tombow glue. It was starting to get empty. You could see I was shaking it earlier. But this little precision tip works really well for these little fine strings that I have here. You can see earlier I marked it with a pencil, so I remembered exactly where I wanted it. Just a small pencil mark at the ends so I can get it back where I had it before. And then I'm going to put the tail on the kite first before putting the kite down. Just like that. I also used the little die that cuts out the little bows that can go on the tail, and I just cut out some of the same yellow cardstock that I use for the frame on the top of the kite, and I'm just going to add those with a little bit of glue right along that tail there. You could have also made them in the different colors that were in the kite. I wasn't sure what else to do with this. I couldn't think of a sentiment or anything, so I just started adding some white gel pen dots around it just to give it a little texture to that mermaid cardstock. And then I decided I was going to make a birthday card because I never have enough birthday cards. So I used my Harold's ABCs to spell out happy birthday, and I cut a sentiment banner from some fake tan cardstock here, and I'm just lining it up on my grid mat so I can kind of make sure it's straight, and I'm going to stamp that sentiment right in the center. And I'm using the VersaFine ink. I just think it makes a nice crisp black impression. I especially like it for sentiments. And then I got a little bit more of the Tombow glue to come out. I held it upside down for a while. And then I'm going to make sure that my card is once again lined up to where the top is lined up with the grid and the bottom where it would sit if it was standing up is lined up straight. That way I can make sure my sentiment is lined up straight with how it would be if it was standing up. And there is the finished card with those cool little shaker beads in there. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.